talk about what is pre-existing data. What do we mean when we talk about that? Constraints to be aware of as you're thinking through a project using pre-existing data, some resources for your own explorations, the impact of loading pre-existing data into sumApp, and then Tim is going to demonstrate. He has this tool we call the validator, and we'll end up demonstrating that. Your hosts today are Christine and Tim. I think you all know us, the co-founders of Greater Than the Sum and sumApp. And so for those of you who aren't familiar, we have this monthly sequence of community of practice sessions. On the second Monday, we do an on-ramp, which is an introductory session to people who aren't familiar with social system mapping, or people who just want to look at other people's maps, because we always share someone's social system map at the on-ramp. Next time, which is the May 11th, I'm going to share our community practice map. So if you're not on the community practice map yet and you would like to be, we would love to have you. And Kara will put a link to that in the chat right now so that you can click the link and opt yourself into that map. But I haven't actually formally presented it or walked through it with anybody except for me and Tim yet. And so we'll start doing that and start having more conversations about that. The third Monday of every month, we have a deep dive conversation, which sort of tends to grow out of the on-ramp conversations, where we pay more attention, we dig deeper into a topic that has arisen. Next, in May, we'll be talking about just how do we keep our map going? How do we engage our community with it? And how do we keep it alive? And then the fourth Monday, which is like today, we have a tech talk. And oops, I didn't edit that. I should have. I'm not going to share our community practice map at the next tech talk. What we're going to do is we're going to talk. Today's session is actually going to be sort of a beginning session for dealing with pre-existing data. It actually can get rather complex rather quickly, and we realized as we were planning for this session that we needed to break it into two. So next month we'll do the advanced session for dealing with pre-existing data. So today's agenda. Greetings and agenda review. We're going to have chat introductions in a minute, demonstration of loading pre-existing data, what and why, resources. I just did all that, walk through the process, Tim's validator. Normally, we've formally scheduled an hour for this session, and normally what we do is when we get to the top of the hour, those who only want to stick around who are satisfied and only scheduled an hour, we have a sort of a closing and say goodbye. And then generally Tim and I and Kara usually stick around for an extra half an hour for anybody who wants to ask more questions, have more conversation with each other, and just dig in further. We're going to do that today with one exception, which is that we're going to wrap up 5 minutes early because I have a client call at the top of the hour that I can't move. So we'll close up early and I'll get out of here 5 minutes early. And then Tim and Kara will still stick around. Okay, so that's the agenda. And then let's do, I'm gonna do chat intros today, and I'm gonna give you 3 prompts, one at a time. So the first prompt is simply gonna be your name, your pronouns, and your location. If you could put those in the chat, so we can all see who's here. I think that's everybody. Marianne, hi Marianne, welcome. Saw you jump in. Hi, Katie. Okay, and the next is what you, just really briefly, what it is that you hope that learning to do this kind of mapping will enable you to contribute to the world. I mean, all of you, if you're here at the tech talk, that means you're sort of hardcore about learning this stuff. And you must have a motivation. So I'm curious what it is. And with everything, this is an invitation. It's not a requirement. So feel free to ignore any suggestions I make if you don't feel comfortable responding. And I'm also inviting you to read each other's chat contributions if you're not. I am. Collective empowerment is one of my core values. And making the visible the invisible really resonates for me as well. Okay, last one. One thing that's helping you to get through this COVID crisis, something that you're just leaning on or appreciating in the daily stresses and challenge. Zoom dance parties. Lovely. Okay.
Christine?
Yeah.
The link you put into the chat is asking me to give it some credentials, but then once I give it the credentials, it says you're already a member.
Oh, then it will, what it will do, it should do, is send you an invitation link.
Oh, okay.
So check your.
Okay.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, everyone. So I'm gonna stop sharing and just talk a little bit about when we're talking about pre-existing data, what do we mean? Usually in a survey, you get a survey, you get new fields, you don't have any data in there, you fill the fields. That's how a survey works, is it's asking for new information. But in our context, it's not exactly the same thing as a survey. And it's often the case that you have some kind of data about the members that you want to map that you already have your hands on. For instance, if you have a client relationship manager CRM program, you may have more information than just names and emails that you that are elements that you're going to parts of those dimensions of the people that you're going to want to map. And so you might want to put that into sumApp. You might be keeping this information in Google spreadsheets, or you might have recently done a survey. I know Narayan and Chris have been working in a situation where they're gathering data in one format, and then they want to put some of that data into sumApp to map it. And the reasons you would do this, I mean, may be obvious, but one of them is because if you've just recently asked people for that information, it just feels obnoxious to ask them for it again. Or if it's information that you know that they know that you know it, it's like, why are they asking me this when they already know it? So just to reduce the ask and the ease of making things easier for your population. Good morning, Jim. Another benefit of loading pre-existing data is that then you have a lot of data to play with as you're making a prototype map. So like we just loaded a bunch of pre-existing data for a client, and then we could make a bunch of views that give them, we haven't started gathering data about their relationships yet, but we can do clustering on various other dimensions and show them the functionality in a way that looks really good, and we're not asking them to sort of imagine everything. So that's another benefit. Relevant constraints to be aware of relative to loading pre-existing data into sumApp are: one, this only works in tiers 3 and 4. So if you're in a tier 1 or a tier 2 account, you'll need to upgrade. A thing to note, if you upgrade to a tier 3 or 4 account, you can't downgrade it back to a tier 1 or 2 account. It's just, as we go up the tiers, we add more complexity to what you can do with your data. And once we get all that, more complexity in there, it's just really impossible to know how to then squish it all back down into a simpler format. So you can go up, but you can't go down. So keep that in mind. It only works with elements data, so we're not able at this point to add pre-existing data about relationships. So like the social network analysis relationships, if you've done any kind of surveying along those lines, those connection informations won't be loaded. It will just be information about the individuals, whether those are persons or organizations, about the dots on the map, not about the relationships between them. We can't do that yet. We'd love to, but it's really complex. A thing to note, I will talk about survey fields and functional fields. Functional fields are not the same as pre-existing data. Functional fields are fields that are part of the programming of making sumApp work, and those include first name, last name, email, and segment. The first three are required, segment is optional, but those 4 fields are functional. So they're not fields that you need to, you're gonna need them no matter what. But those aren't what we're talking about when we're talking about pre-existing data. When we're talking about pre-existing data, we're talking about taking other dimensions and adding them to the survey, pre-filled with information. Another thing to note, so I said this in the beginning, but pre-existing data can be, I mean, you can have a rather simple set of pre-existing data, or it can be super complex, and there can be tons of it. We deal with, tend to end up on the super complex end, and what we feel like is how we wanted to handle this was, so we're going to start with a relatively simple data set, and we're going to teach you how to load that manually, because if you learn how to load it manually, then you at least have you will conceptually understand what's going on. And it's really important to understand that conceptually before you get into the next thing I'm going to say, which is, because we sort of tend to live on the really complex side, or, you know, really large data sets where there's hundreds of names. And so it makes it really hard to make sure you're capturing all the data that could be loaded. Tim has created this thing we call the header maker. Works in VBA, it's an Excel VBA code, and the header maker will generate your headers and extract your data, and it's all fairly automated. I mean, you have to click you have to make some choices and click some buttons, but the header maker is really, really useful when you've got a lot of data to deal with. But until you understand conceptually what's going on, it's not wise to mess with the header maker, because you just make big messes. So we're going to deal with the header maker next month. We're going to stick to the simple side today. Okay, so we've got some tools to share with you, and I'm going to start sharing my screen again. And I'm going to show you where they are, and Kara is going to put some links into the chat as I do this. But the first tool you can find, so this is going to be our test project for today. The first tool that's helpful to know about is if you go to the launch section and add members, right here, there's this thing called template file, and there's also a thing called formatting instructions. So if you open the template file, it is an Excel spreadsheet that will, hang on, show you the ways your file needs to be set up. So you can get that out of sumApp. You can also get formatting instructions out of sumApp. I'm going to go to here. I'm not going to use that version. A thing to note, if you're not familiar with it, is there's this little question mark down here, which takes us to the knowledge base in Zoho. And if we just put in a search, so I'm going to search on pre-existing data. And so I'm going to use this, no, I'm going to use this article. But the point is, you can find this stuff yourself when you're in sumApp, and it also exists. And Kara's going to put links to this also in the chat in case you're not in sumApp yet. So just make sure I've gotten everything I'm supposed to say here. Oh, the other things Cheryl will Kara, are you? Yeah, okay. Kara's also going to put a link to a thing we call the validator, which is an Excel spreadsheet with some macros in it to do validation, which Tim is going to walk you through at the end, as well as a link to a video on how to use the validator. So you have all that stuff ready. And if you get to the point where you feel comfortable and you want to play with the header maker, ping Tim in Slack and just say, hey, can I get a copy of the header maker? But I would say that is only for the adventurous people who are not going to have a meltdown if they really mess up their data set and know how to like keep a clean one and just dealing with the complexities of a lot of data. Okay, so that's the resources that I wanted to share with you. Now, here is an example of, so we're going to work on this data set, if it will just do its thing. Okay, so this is an example of some data that you might have exported from your CRM or might have in an Excel spreadsheet somewhere, that kind of thing. And so this probably looks to you like, this looks good, I should be able to load this and it should work just fine. But this is not what sumApp knows how to read. It doesn't know what to do with these columns. It knows what to do with these columns because these columns are all the functional columns and they're mandatory, or at least these three are mandatory, but they're part of sumApp. So they don't take any extra doctoring. But these three columns, sumApp is like, I don't know what you want me to do with that. So what we need to do is, here's an example. We're going to tell sumApp, we're going to rewrite the headers so that sumApp can read it. So first we're gonna tell it what kind of a question field is this. Then we're gonna tell it what is the actual question text, and then what are the options. So, and then once so this is the way it needs to be for sumApp to read it. So I'm gonna just briefly show you that in action. Hang on. So I put this in a notepad so that it's easier for us to read what's going on. And I also put, for the most part, put spaces between the pipes just for the ease of reading this on a screen. It doesn't matter whether there's a space between the pipes and the text or not. You can do it either way, will work. But like I said, for ease of reading's sake, I put it spaced. So this first question, gender identity. Now I just noticed that I'm gonna actually make another one. David, what was yours? They, we, us.
Ours. We, us, ours.
Okay, so I'm just adding that to the header. And as you can see, the first thing is, oh, I wanted to show you one other thing, which is if you're wondering which kind of field you're looking at, or you want it to be, if we go back to here, and we go to setup, and we go to the create survey, so this is the word you're looking for: text input, text field. Once you see what kind of field I want to put over here, or I want sumApp to add, then you just, now it's acting strange. The label is right there. So going back to here, I've set it up so that I have got the field type there, and then I've got the actual question, so if you'll notice in my data set, often it's going to come out of your thing as a label, just gender. But if you want people to be knowing what it is you actually are asking of them here, sometimes it's not clear, you might want to put some more text to that. And then I have all of the options right here. So I'm going to take this whole thing, just copy it and put it in here for gender. And then double check and look at the top. It looks up here, looks good to me. Then I'm going to take the next one. So this one is going to be a select box where there's a bunch of checkboxes that people can pick from. And we wanted to actually be explicit that we're talking about what state do you work in, not just state could really mean anything. And then oh no, that was a, sorry. Select is a drop down. So the states are going to be in a drop down, and then the teams are going to be in a checkbox where they can select. In this instance, they can select as many as they want. A couple things to note here. The order that you put them in the header is the order that they will show up on in the order they'll show up in sumApp. So when you load this list, I wanted these teams to be in alphabetical order, so I wrote them in alphabetical order. You could put them in whatever order you want, but sumApp will read them in that order. In the header, it matters what order they're in. In the cells itself, like for instance here, I've put them in the wrong order, or well, not in alphabetical order. It doesn't matter in sumApp or in the cell what order they're in. But another thing that we need to be aware of is, and some of those of you who know Kumu might be already wondering about this, is in this instance, often what comes out of your, wherever your data source is, your options, if they're in the same column at all, will be separated by commas or some other differentiator. They need to be separated by pipes in order for sumApp to recognize them as separate options. If they're in there the way they are with commas, each different cell is probably going to look like a whole different sentence. It's just going to treat each one like a whole sentence and keep all those options together. But we want it to break them down and recognize red versus orange versus gold. So what we're going to do is go through a find and replace and replace the comma space with, I'm going to put a space and then a pipe and then a comma and replace them all. Okay, so now that we've separated them by pipes, sumApp will be able to read it. Tim, can you think, did I miss anything that we wanted me to address right here? Oh, a couple things, sorry. One is, let's say that there's a purple team, but I forgot to put I did not put the purple team in the header. That cell will load, but the purple team will not, there will be no purple team option in the survey, and it won't be checked off for people on the purple team because I left it out of the header. So if it's not in the header, it's not going to show up in the survey. Another thing is, let's say I've made a typo and left a letter out or however. This brown team, sumApp cannot interpret that as going with the brown team option. So that option will also just get excluded. It just won't get loaded. So you want to be really careful with your, and really make sure that your data is really clean before you start playing around with this. Okay, I think that's it for me. I'm going to stop sharing, and then Tim is going to take this data set that I just created and load it into sumApp and show you what happens when we do that, and then what you can do with it from there. Right, Mr. Hansen?
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Just remember, code is psychopathically literal. So, I mean, that's a good way to think about it. It's like psychopathically literal. So, yeah. Okay. So here's sumApp, and usually when you enter into sumApp, you'll be in this view. If you have more than one project, they'll all be listed here. But you go here and you would go to add members. And this is where you can add them by hand, or you can upload them in that CSV file. But first, we're going to go to where you actually create the survey. And for brand new projects, all brand new projects get a default survey just to get you started. And it's in there. You can keep it if you want, or use some of the fields, or if you don't want them, just drag them aside and get rid of them. If you drag something to the side that you go, oh wait, I wanted that, just refresh and it'll come back. So you can always get them back as long as you haven't saved anything. When we upload pre-existing data, if you already, it'll all end up on the bottom here. That's where it gets placed once we add it. So you can have pre-existing data and mix it up with new questions that you might want to ask in your survey. So you can do both. So we go to launch, and then I'm going to, and so here's Christine's data. Oh, pardon me. Thought I had that all set up with Christine's data. Once you've created your data, of course, you have to put it in a place where you can find it. Oh,
You can just load whatever you've got. I think that's fine.
yeah, no, this is no, this came right out of sumApp.
Okay.
We were, I apologize to everybody here. I thought I had this all set up to prevent this kind of muddling around. Do you have that data set that you just made?
Yeah, hang on. How about, should we just have me load it?
Yeah, would you?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll just briefly go to where to load it, and then hang on a second. Do I even know where I put? Okay, now we're both just looking like idiots.
Here, I'll stop my sharing so you can show
Okay.
that.
David had a question in the chat maybe we could answer in the meantime. He's
Yeah.
wondering, when adding new data, do you have the ability to revert to a previous version if you happen to make a mistake?
If you make a mistake, what you do is you just drag the data fields off. You just delete them, and so you're not stuck with anything you load. You just go to that survey field, and as soon as Christine loads that, we'll show you how to get rid of it.
Okay. I'm having one of those deer in the headlights moments when I realize I don't remember where I should put that exact file, but no. Oh, sorry. We like did all this practicing yesterday.
We did. And then,
And
misplaced that file. Yeah.
hang on, it's called. I mean, I've got the file right open, but I don't have it. Where the hell is it? So annoying. Sorry, everyone. Okay, so I need this one. No, I need, yes, this one. A thing neither of us mentioned is when you save your data, you need to save it in a CSV format, not in the Excel format. So this I think is saved. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna load it. So I found the file, load the file. And then, so it tells me the import is complete. It added 20 entries, which is, I knew that ahead of time. I knew I wanted it to add 20. Didn't reject any, so yay. If it had rejected any, you could click right here and it would give you a little memo saying what row was rejected and hopefully why it was rejected.
If you're uploading a lot of data, please be patient. There's a lot of stuff going on in the background.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing and go back to you, right, Tim?
Sure.
Oh, hang on. So just to note, so I just loaded it. And so now we have 20 new members. These are, again, are their functional fields. So those are showing up right here. And then if we go to, Tim, I'll let you go to the survey and talk through that. Okay?
Sure.
So go ahead and share your screen then.
Oh, so here in the, so we go to the survey and we scroll down and we see here are the fields that have been added, and they say added by import data. So you know the difference between the ones that you've created in the survey and the ones that you've created by uploading data. And if you've uploaded the wrong thing or you don't want what you have, you just drag it off to the side and delete it. And this will tell you that, hey, you're trying to delete a field that actually has data associated with it. Are you sure you want to do that? Because you can't undo it once you've clicked OK. If you decide, no, I made a mistake, you just cancel. And these can be moved into different locations. So you can reorder your survey. Once you've done that, make sure you click the save button, otherwise it won't stay. So then we go to launch and we go back to manage members. And then here, each person has their own link, their own front end link that they then go to and fill out. So we go here and we click the link and we go to this person's survey. Oh, and that's the other thing then to note. We get an error here saying, hey, that doesn't work, because this brand new project, you have to turn it on. If it's off, it won't send emails and the front end won't actually work, except for this part right here. So we refresh and then we can go to their survey. And then here's the default survey. None of that's been changed. No data has been added to it. But if we go down to the pre-existing data, we see that the choices have all been made. And then now a person can start altering their choices from what we had if they've moved or changed teams. Yeah, so the one thing I do is just to double check, I always like to go to my data that I uploaded and then just randomly pick a few people and make sure the data looked exactly as it should. And then that way you can feel confident that things worked. It's never not worked, but I always do that just to double check.
And then there's another way you could do that.
Yes, the other way is you can go to data management. You could download the members list, and then you could open this up and then compare the data in here to your upload list, just to make sure everybody has the data that they're supposed to have. So again, I always do that just to be safe.
Thanks, Tim.
Mm-hmm.
So you can stop sharing and I'll go through a couple questions that people have, and then we'll talk about the validator. Okay, so David, did that make sense, the answer that we gave you about reverting to previous versions?
Absolutely.
Okay, but just to note that sumApp is not keeping in the elements survey, sumApp is not keeping every iteration of the data. It's just keeping what you leave on the survey. So if you drag the question off, you're essentially deleting that whole column of data, and then you need to reload it from your pre-existing data. It's not like in other words, you can't just back up, like you can back up through revisions of a Google document and see what was there, 20 minutes ago and an hour ago and 3 months ago. It's more like it's either there or it's not there. But yes, you can get rid of anything that you don't like that happened and redo it.
Do people export to a CSV and then revert to that?
You can do that. That's a more complicated thing, and we do that. It's just you have to really be comfortable with thinking about iterations of data and how things get overwritten. Tim does that a lot, where we download a whole data set and then we fiddle with it and put it back in again. Especially if you want to keep changes that people have made, like new data. So you've got like old data plus new data. You can download it all and then reload it. Another thing to think about as you do this is that, say you load a column, states, and people start saying, oh, I've moved, or I'm working in more states, and they're editing their data. At that point, if you reload the old data, your old data will rewrite their changes. So you want to be really careful. You can't just randomly just keep throwing data in there without sort of taking care of thinking about what might they have done and what might my actions do to what they've done.
Good point.
Another question. So Marianne said, this is like sending a survey to populate these fields so that if you already have this data, you can build a map with an Excel import.
Hi, Christine. This is Marianne.
Yeah.
Actually, Kara already answered that for me,
Okay.
I think. So this would be if you didn't want to send out a survey and you already had some information and you gathered new information, you could create these fields manually.
Yeah, you can load them manually. Yeah, the part that didn't about your question that I wanted to comment on was that you said so that you can build the map with an Excel, right, import the Excel into sumApp and then use the live link from there. David says we can add new options to existing fields and they will appear in the original order. New questions are added to the end, as you've explained. And you can, once they're loaded, you can rearrange the question order. So you're not stuck with that order. You just know that they're going to show up at the bottom at first. And yes, you can add new options to the existing fields. You can also, let's say you've loaded a question and there's data in there, and then you realize that was a dumb way to say that question. I think there's a better way to say it, or someone else tells you that that's how it works for me. And then you can rewrite the question and the data will still be there. But then you want to realize if you're going to load another batch, say 100 more people later, you need to either revise your question in your header of your spreadsheet so that it matches what you changed in sumApp, or what you're going to end up with is 2 questions with different bunches of data. And then you'll have another kind of mess to deal with. Okay. Phil says, the biggest question I had after using this process was how to subsequently import additional data without duplicating entries. You don't have to worry about duplicating entries.
Well, you do right now if you have, there's a slight bug in there, and like, if the emails are all supposed to be lowercase. So if you have, say, Tim Hansen, all lowercase, and then you have Tim Hansen with a capital T, it will create 2 different people. It shouldn't right now, but it does. So one of the things that you have to be aware of is make sure everything is lowercase for emails. That becomes a little problem. There is a merge function in sumApp. So in case you do that, you can merge people into one person. But make sure everything's lowercase. And one of the things the validator does is just make sure it just down cases everything in case you miss that.
But so Phil, so aside from the bug of the cases, sumApp is always going to match on the emails. So as long as the email, you've got the same person with the same email, it will match it. So they won't create a new one, but it will overwrite whatever other fields are adjacent to the same emails. So if you say you want to change everybody's segments, or you've got some new information, it will just line up on the email and overwrite the segment. You can also use that. We do this a lot too, is have a member list, and then as things change, we might have a new column of data that we didn't have before that's attached to the emails. Just strip it down to just the required fields and this new question, and just load that. And then you're not going to be maybe messing up other columns that had data in there already.
Okay. Yeah, I would suggest loading a list of people only one time, just to make sure you don't overwrite what people have changed for themselves. And then, and then what Christine said, if you have a new question, just load that one question.
And if you import it,
go ahead.
If you import a list that doesn't have entries in every field for each person on the list, will a blank value override existing information in that?
It will.
In the sumApp
Yeah.
field?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I want us to move to the validator. But I'm just going to quickly whip through these. So Mariana asks, when you upload data, you then have to send a different link to everyone to update their profile. Everyone will have their own link, and yes, whether you have to or not is a separate question, but everyone can update their own information via their own link, and there is an automatic email function. So you don't have to capture the emails and deal with them manually. You just hit the send button. And then John says, planning to import data from existing Kumu map. In Kumu, the person name field is one element. I know. Yes. So that gets a little messy, and we always sort of struggle with that as well. But breaking up, yeah, it just has to be broken up. I'm gonna have Tim we're going to jump into the validator, and then, yeah. You want to share that?
Mhm.
Thanks.
So I think you're getting a link to so that you can go get this. It's so if you click on that link, you'll be taken here.
Oh, wait,
first-
can I just add a couple things?
Certainly.
Sorry, I forgot to say. One is it's in Excel. So if you don't have Excel, you'll need to find someone who has Excel who can run this for you. Unfortunately, it won't work with just like in Google or any other requires Excel. And another thing was that I was supposed to say. And the validator is for your functional data. It's not yet for your pre-existing data, but it's to get your functional data nice and clean so that when you try to load your data, so like Tim will use this on all data sets, even if it doesn't have pre-existing data, just flat out before we load anything, we run it through the validator so that life is easy. Okay, sorry to interrupt.
So when you go here, the first thing you need to do is download it. Open it. It's going to ask you to enable. It's going to ask you to let the macros run in the background. So you have to give it permission, and then you have to enable the content. And I have some just fake data in here that I put in here. So this is going to go through all of it, and it's going to. We're just essentially just if say you've used it, you just want to get rid of the old data, just click it here. But otherwise. If you're importing your data, if you're going to copy and paste your own data here after you've cleared the old, do not overwrite these fields. Just start on the first data field here and then import just the data, but not those headers. So to use it, you just click the big green button and follow the pop-up messages. Right here it says, hey, everything's going to be sorted to the top. So when there's an error, it's all going to be at the beginning of the file. And so right here, it says, hey, there is a email that doesn't have the correct format. So we just have to go in and look, and we just have to examine all the blue ones. And it's like, oh, I guess I forgot to put the .com in there, or .io, or whatever it might be, or JOM. And so for all the blue ones, you just have to go in and see what might be wrong. Once you've corrected it, you just click the green button again, and it says, hey, there's no first name. So we just go through and just do everything it tells us to do. We'd have to go find that name, although I can see in the email what it is. And then we just go back to hit the green button. It says, hey, the first column looks good. Okay, we forgot somebody here. And again, we'd have to go find that name or from the email. It's Rana. And it says here that there are no empty email fields, so that's good. But it does say now that there's a duplicate here. And if there was more than one duplicate, they come in pairs. So it'd be 2 reds or 3 reds, or then there'd be another set of blue or green, so that you could easily find out what the duplicates were. In this instance, we see that Darius, for some reason, has the same email here. So we just delete it because we got that wrong. We just messed that up. So we just fix things, and then we just walk through it again until finally we get no error messages. And so at this point, this is pretty clean. Like if you copied and pasted your data that you have from some other, particularly online program, you end up getting a lot of hidden characters, or non-printing characters, they call them, and that can break the upload. This cleans all of that out, cleans out all the hidden HTML characters, which can cause a lot of problems. So this cleans everything, trims all of white spaces from the edge, from the names and everything, because that can cause a problem too, because you'll end up with instead of Molina, it'll be Molina with a space. And that later on can create issues. So, so this gives you the best probability of it loading into sumApp without issue. Once you're done, this will export it to a CSV file. You just find where you want it, even though that says desktop. If you want to put it on your desktop, you still have to click it and then OK. And then you just give it a name. And then you can close out of there, save or don't save. And here you just look on your desktop and I look for test. And here it is. It says, gives you tests, and then this is added automatically, this validated member list, and it gives you the date and the time at which you did it. So if you've done this multiple times, you can you could go find the series of uploads that you've created. And then at this point, now you know that this is going to load without issue. Here you would then put in your pre-existing data. Say that you would either create it here or you would create it in a different sheet and add it here. The best way to do that is make sure that you are loading the right person's pre-existing data with the right name. And the easiest way to do that for me is I just sort on the email field, because the email field is unique. If you sort on names, there might be multiple Tims in there, so that might get you won't get a unique. So I sort on the email, and then I would sort my pre-existing data on the email, and then I can copy and paste, and it should all line up. The one thing to be to be aware of is if in creating your unique list here, you had 2 duplicate rows and you deleted one, then you'd have to make sure that the pre-existing data didn't have a duplicate row as well, so that when you copied and pasted, they were mismatched. And then you would have this, and then you would upload it, just like we showed previously.
Cool.
Yeah.
So there's a couple more questions in the chat, and then I think I'm gonna pop off, and then you guys can all, whoever wants to stick around and ask Tim more questions can do so. So, and then Kara just also shared that, the validator again. Mariana asks, do you recommend preloading network member profile, first name, last name, email, so that when you send the survey out, participants can update their profile and fill out connectivity responses for everyone? So I may be confusing things for you, and I hope not, but what you just referred to, Mariana, are the functional fields. And so you have to load the functional fields. You can't do a sumApp thing without those functional fields. If you then are going to load some extra data that you already have access to, that's great to load that on top of or in addition to the functional fields. And then I just lost it. Yeah. And yes. And then once you've got all that set up, then that's the time to send out the link so that you can get them to update their survey data. If there's new questions, they can go ahead and do that. And then to do their connection questions. Reiner asked, do we need to have Excel? Tim, is there a certain version that is required? Or just any? You're muted.
No, I think any version will work. And if it doesn't, let me know. I haven't tested in every version. I just have like the Microsoft 360. So it's in its latest version. Hopefully there'll be no issues with older versions.
So John, do you want to say, I'm sorry, I'm reading everybody's questions. It's because I'm just feeling a little rushed because I'm concerned about getting to my client, my next call in time, so I'm not being properly polite and inclusive. Apologize. John, would you like to say your question?
Yeah, so in this Kumu map that exists, I have both a person and organizations, and I connected the people to the organization. So if I focus on any one person, I can see the organizations they're connected to.
Yep.
I have email addresses for all the persons. I don't have email addresses for the organizations. Am I importing both the persons and the organizations? And if I am, is there any way to retain the connection between them?
So that's actually, there's a few different ways you can handle that. And it depends in part on your budget and in part on how many organizations you're talking about. And so if you do a 2 project and link the persons and orgs projects, the dual element feature that we just came out with, we'll be able to have everybody in there, and you will be able to have the organizations, whoever represents. This is a complex question, and I'm feeling like I'm not going to do it justice at the moment. I would suggest, except, and I apologize, I'm talking.
I mean, it's a little hard to know without seeing your map and your data on how you've linked them together.
Yeah.
Because you can do that in Camus through like a clustering effect.
Yep.
Or you just manually, if you created your map manually,
Yes,
you could just connect them
that's how I did it.
manually.
That's how I did it.
Well,
Yeah.
you can't connect them manually if you're using the sumApp live link, because it's read only. So if you're putting the live link into Kumu, you kind of have to have your data doing what you want it to do, because you can't manually go in and doctor it.
You can download it as CSV and upload it manually.
Yeah, you can do that.
So it's hard to answer that question though without actually seeing what your data looks like. I'd have to kind of look at that.
Okay, I'd love to share it with you, Tim. I'm excited about using sumApp, and I think I could be a good demand creator for sumApp.
It's great. Okay, and David just suggested to me that I need to take a deep breath between meetings, which is exactly why I want to stop 5 minutes early, because clearly I get to that point where it's obvious I need to take a deep breath. And so I'm going to jump off, and Kara and Tim will do the closing at the top of the hour and stick around. And so thank you all.
Thank you, Christine.
Lovely to see you all. See you soon. Thanks. Bye.